Thank you, Kaushik. Thank you, Dr. Lori Marino, for having accepted our invitation to address our students on a very interesting and an important topic. I must, first of all, thank you for sparing your time to enlighten our students on cetacean conservation and behavior. This is an international webinar hosted by the Natural Science Association of the Department of Zoology, the School of Life Sciences, St. Joseph's University. We are involved in many such initiatives. This time we reached out to you and you readily accepted to address our students. Thank you for providing us with this opportunity. I will hand it over to Kaushik for the start of the webinar.
So, good evening, everybody. And it is an immense honor for me to be in the presence of my idol, a person who I have looked up to. The main reason for me being for, as you can already see, I'm out of words. So, this is just basically me being a fanboy at the moment right now. So it is an honor for me to introduce the webinar. And good evening to all present here. My name is Kaushik, and I am a student of St. Joseph's University, a second year student doing my bachelor's degree in botany and zoology. I will be the student coordinator for this webinar, along with Jitu Jude, who unfortunately isn't available today as he is traveling. I would like to thank the team of Whale Sanctuary Project and Dr. Lori Marino, who is present here today, for making the webinar on cetacean conservation and behavior finally happen. The main reason why we are conducting this webinar is to give each and everyone present around here the knowledge about the mammals that rule the depths of the ocean, the behemoths known as cetaceans, which are basically classified into two families, the odontocetes, which include toothed whales like the common bottlenose dolphin, while the other family, mysticetes, it includes the largest mammal in the world, which is the blue whale. The topic of discussion today that we have is relatively less discussed across the entire subcontinent, and it is high time we know the importance of these cetaceans and what impact they have on the world that we live from an environmental point of view, and how much importance they hold in the hierarchy when we follow the animal kingdom. Now, as a general trivia and as an introduction to the webinar, I just have to say that the Gangetic River dolphin is the national aquatic animal of India, and there are two different species of oceanic dolphins that we can see throughout the year in the Indian Ocean, in the east coast and west coast of Indian Ocean, which are the Iridue dolphin and the humpback dolphins. While giant whales, including the humpback whale, the sperm whale, the bride whale, the bride's whale, sei whale, dwarf sperm whale, pygmy humpback whale, and the melon-headed whale, and the largest mammal in the world, can be seen both across both the coasts of the Indian Ocean. And as a last trivial fact to this introduction, there are about 94 different species of whales, dolphins, and porpoises observed around the whole world. This is just a general idea what I had to speak about these magnificent animals. Over to you, Abhishek, to talk about the initiatives done by NSA, the Natural Science Association of St. Joseph's University.
Thank you, Kaushik. Good evening, everyone. I'm Abhishek Mishra, President of Natural Science Association. On behalf of Natural Science Association, Department of Zoology, School of Life Sciences, St. Joseph's University, I welcome you all for the Cetacean Conservation and Behavior webinar. Natural Science Association is one of the largest and the most active association of St. Joseph's University. It is the biggest association in terms of involving science students. It is the only association holding the four different foras which are active in the field of birding, herping, mammal watch, and the marine biology. Natural Science Association is very actively organizing the webinar of the national and the international level. This all activities makes Josephites more curious towards the animal behavior. And we are glad that Dr. Laurie Marino joined us today to enlighten our knowledge regarding the same topic. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. Now I hand over to Kaushik again to give an introduction about the webinar.
So, as you all know, that this webinar is a webinar which is not like the ones that we have done before. So, this is a webinar that I have been planning on for doing from a very long time, and then it has finally happened in the presence of Dr. Lori Marino and the entire team of Whale Sanctuary Project. This is a webinar that will majorly focus on cetaceans or the fauna of the oceans. And now I hand over the mic to Abhishek Mishra again to give us a brief introduction about the speaker for the day.
Okay, thank you. Lori Marino is a neuroscientist and the expert in animal behavior and intelligence, formerly on the faculty of Emory University. Lori received her PhD in biopsychology in 1995 and is internationally known for her work on the evolution of the brain and intelligence in dolphins and the whales. She has published over 130 peer reviewed scientific papers, book chapters, and magazine articles on marine mammal biology and cognition, comparative brain anatomy, self awareness in non human animals, human non human animal relationships, and the evolution of intelligence. She is also an expert on marine mammal capability issues such as dolphin assisted therapy and the educational claims of the zoo and aquarium industry. I welcome you, ma'am, for the webinar.
Thank you.
To,
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, you can start with the presentation now.
Oh, I can. Okay. Well, again, thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. It's wonderful to be able to tell you about a project. And I love talking with students. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project, show you a very short film, and then hope that we have some time for questions and answers and just general discussion. So I'm going to share my screen with you now. And let's see. Okay. Mhm. Let me, my apologies. I am trying to get this to work. It did work yesterday.
That's not
Oh,
an issue, madam. It's fine. Not a
okay.
problem.
Do you see the PowerPoint?
As of now, your screen is visible, madam.
It is. So do you see the first slide that says the Whale Sanctuary Project?
No, madam. The PowerPoint is not visible, but your wallpaper is visible.
Okay. Let's try that again. Hmm. Okay, I have it up on my screen, but for some reason it is not. Let me try this. Hmm. I am not sure what the problem is because we did try this out yesterday in a test run. And for some reason it is not showing.
If, madam, if you are not able to share the slide on your personal computer, what I would suggest is, if you can send that PowerPoint presentation to me, I'll be able to share it on my screen then. If that would be
Okay, let me do that. Let me do that.
okay, madam. You
Thank
have
you.
my address with you, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, madam.
I will do
Thank you.
that right now.
Sure, madam.
Okay. It will not allow me to send it to you. It's too large.
Ma'am, till that,
Yeah,
one thing you can do, like you can leave the meeting and join again. So maybe you can
let me
share them.
do that. Let me do
Yeah,
that. Okay, thank you. My apologies.
no problem.
I believe Abhishek and Kaushik, I think it's the sharing, no? Just guide the speaker. You've done the trial run, no? So probably the share slide option, or probably sharing the screen, we have to guide to share the slide wherever it is being kept.
Sure, sir. Yesterday, everything went well. Maybe there might be some connective issues from both the ends.
I think
I'm
so. Even our
not about.
scientific temper webinar also had this. Yes, madam has joined back. We'll see if madam could share it.
Okay, sir.
Uh,
Madam, you're on. Madam. Yes, ma'am. The screen is visible right now, and the presentation is also visible.
yes. Madam, you got to unmute.
Can you hear me? I'm getting.
Yes, madam, you are audible, but the thing was there was an echo coming from your side. Ma'am, you're on mute right now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, madam. I'm able to hear you, but there is an echo coming.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am. You
Okay, I'm
are
going to try. Oh, I'm sorry. I will try to share again.
okay, madam. Not a problem. Yes, ma'am. The screen is visible right now, and the
Yes.
PowerPoint is also visible.
So the PowerPoint is visible.
Yes, madam. In fact, first page says the Whale Sanctuary Project, Lori Marino,
Yes.
President. Yes,
Okay.
madam.
Okay. My apologies, everyone, for the technical difficulties. These things happen, but I'm glad that we got it working, and I thank you for staying with us on this issue. Again, I want to tell you that it is really an honor to be asked to talk to you today about the Whale Sanctuary Project. Now, this project is probably something a bit different than you're used to hearing about. But what I am hoping is that it will serve as an illustration of some of the ways that we are trying to help whales in the future. So the question that one has to first ask when one is considering dolphins and whales and porpoises is, who are they? And as was mentioned, there are 90 some odd species. So each one is different, but at the same time, they all share a certain nature that makes them cetacean. And I'm going to just talk about some of the ways that they're similar to each other. And these are some of the reasons why we are building a sanctuary and trying to find a way to get them out of concrete tanks. I'm going to talk about 3 different characteristics: self-awareness, emotional bonding, and social complexity and culture. In 2021, my colleague Diana Reese and I conducted a study with 2 common bottlenose dolphins in which we found that they were able to recognize themselves in mirrors. And here you see 2 images from that study. On the left is one of the dolphins who is looking under his pectoral fin for a mark that we placed there. And on the right,
Doctor,
hello?
sorry to interrupt.
Pardon me?
The slides aren't moving. Others
No,
also can
they're
confirm.
just images. They're just images.
Oh, but we are still in
Are you
the.
on the mirror self-recognition?
The thing
No,
is,
this
madam,
It's not
uh,
advancing?
yes, ma'am, the slide is not advancing. It is still on the first page, which says the Whale Sanctuary Project.
Oh my, okay. Hmm. What about now?
Yes, madam. We are able to see the second slide, which says who are dolphins and whales.
Okay, I will do this in a that way now. So, as I mentioned, the question about these animals is who are they? And I want to tell you about three different characteristics: their self-awareness, their emotional bonding, and their social complexity and culture. These three characteristics make them very poor candidates for living in concrete tanks, in aquariums, and marine parks, and is the reason why we are creating a sanctuary for them. So, first, to self-awareness. Can you see the two images of the dolphins at the mirror?
Madam, the slide is still on who are whales and dolphins on the second.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see. Do you see the three dolphins jumping?
Uh, in the same slide, is it, madam? Next to the orca?
No. I don't know.
No, it's still in the same slide, madam.
Yeah,
Who are dolphins
okay.
and whales?
Okay, I'm going to close the PowerPoint and open it again and see what happens. Okay. What do you see now, the first slide?
Yes, madam, the first slide.
You see the second one that says who are dolphins and whales?
Yes, madam, that's also visible.
Okay, wonderful. So you should now see the three dolphins jumping, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Self-awareness, emotional, social
Okay.
complexity, culture.
Okay. So I think we can then start with this. So in 2001, my colleague and I, Diana Reese, conducted a study of mirror self-recognition in common bottlenose dolphins. And what we found is that these dolphins were able to recognize themselves in mirrors. They use the mirror to check out different parts of their body when they were marked with a mark from a marker on different parts of their body. On the left, you see one of the dolphins using a reflective surface to check under his pectoral fin for a mark. And on the right, another one of the dolphins is marked above the right eye, and he's using the mirror to check out his reflection. And this is something that's very important because of the fact that it shows these animals have a sense of self. Just like us, they recognize themselves in mirrors, and more importantly, they have a sense of me. So when humans use a mirror to comb their hair or groom or look at themselves, they're bringing a certain level of cognitive sophistication to that situation because they're saying, that's me in the mirror, a sense of me. And we know that common bottlenose dolphins do have that level of self-awareness. We also have indicators that orcas, belugas, and others do as well. So now I want to turn to the social bonds and emotions in dolphins and whales. And this is very important, and it has a tremendous impact upon how they fare, their welfare in captivity. Now, dolphins and whales are socially very complex beings. They're so complex that they exhibit very similar behaviors to what our species exhibits in a social domain. These dolphin and whale societies are held together by very strong emotional ties. And the parent-child relationship is extremely strong. In the picture above, you see a dolphin who's lost her infant, carrying her deceased infant for many days. In the middle picture, what you see is a mass stranding. Now, we don't know exactly why some of these animals strand en masse. These are pilot whales, but it tells us something about how closely bonded they are to each other. Often in the mass stranding, only one animal is sick or injured, and they all follow that individual into the shallows. So it tells you that they have very strong bonds based upon emotions. They also exhibit helping behaviors towards one another and humans, grieving behaviors, as you see in the top photo, and of course, these mass strandings. All of this tells you that these intelligent animals are not only self-aware, but very socially complex. This is a very famous photo of a southern resident killer whale named Tahlequah, who in Washington State in the United States, who a few years ago gave birth to a daughter, and the daughter died after about a half an hour, and she carried the deceased infant for 17 days. And everyone around the world saw this and realized the extent and the depth of their emotional bonding to each other. They also have a lot of cultural aspects to their social life. They have different social roles. So a whole group of dolphins or whales, for instance, is not just a group of interchangeable units, but it's actually different individuals with different roles in the group. They also form higher order alliances, nested alliances of individuals. It's like when we have our immediate family and then our extended family and then our friends and then our work colleagues. That kind of complex hierarchy is found in many dolphin and whale species. And they also cooperate when hunting and share food as well. They have cultural traditions, learned behaviors passed on across the generations that differ from one group to another. And this is very important because it means that one group of orcas or one group of bottlenose dolphins or one group of pilot whales or humpback whales is not the same as every other group. Just like us, they have cultures that differ from region to region and are passed down through learning. On the left, you see an example of a cultural tradition in orcas living off New Zealand. They eat primarily manta rays, and they do this through a very delicate process of extracting the stinger and then eating the ray. And the calves, the youngsters, the juveniles watch the elders do this and perfect their ability to do this over time. On the right, you will see a bottlenose dolphin that's a sponger. Now, these dolphins are very funny because they live off the coast of Australia. And many years ago, a female decided that she was going to put a sponge around her rostrum. And the reason she did that is so that she could root around in the bottom of at the bottom to find fish that were being hidden under the sand. And the sponge protected her rostrum from getting scratched up. And she passed this cultural tradition, if you will, down to her daughter, and then it spread out to some other dolphins. And now that group contains a group of spongers and a group of non-spongers. And so you have a cultural tradition created. They have different dialects. They use different tools, even though they don't have hands. They have cultural traditions in terms of their prey choice and hunting, the way they mate, reproduce, and others. So I hope you can see that these are highly intelligent beings who share a lot of characteristics with us. And that's one of the things that's very important to note, is that while they may live in a very different environment and they may look very different from us, just like us, they have very large, complex brains, very large, complex behaviors, and their sociality is very complex. And just like us, they have cultural traditions. These are all things that make life worthwhile for any cetacean living in the ocean. So with that whirlwind summary of who these animals are, and obviously each species is a little bit different, and we could spend years talking about just one species, but I'm trying to give you a sort of a overall idea about who these beings are. So with that, I do want to turn to the main focus of my talk, which is why create a whale sanctuary? And in order to understand that, one of the things you need to know is that cetacean captivity around the world is something that is really actually growing. There are over 3,500 whales, dolphins, and porpoises held in captivity. And by that, I mean in concrete tanks and small sea pens around the world. Most of them are bottlenose dolphins, orcas, beluga whales, but there are about 10 different species and even hybrids kept. In North America alone, there are 480 bottlenose dolphins, 70 beluga whales, 21 orcas, and other species. So you might ask, well, why is that a problem? And my colleagues and I have spent the last few years investigating the welfare of these animals in tanks, in entertainment parks, in aquariums. And what we found was really astonishing. We found that there are very severe impacts of living in concrete tanks on these animals. And I'm going to tell you about 4 areas where their welfare is severely compromised. First of all, dolphins and whales living in marine parks suffer from systemic illnesses and opportunistic infections. In other words, they suffer from infections that are due to the fact that their immune system is weakened. An opportunistic infection is just what it sounds like, an infection due to the fact that your immune system allows that infection to take hold. Now, dolphins in the wild get infections too, but the question is, why are captive dolphins getting all of these infections if they are living in a closed environment with filtered water? In fact, we don't know. We think it has something to do with the stress of living like that. Now, some of the infections that kill captive cetaceans are pneumonia, which is the #1 cause of death in captive dolphins and whales. Other lung diseases, candidiasis, which is a yeast infection, gastric ulcers and other stomach diseases, and encephalitis. Another common sign of poor welfare is behavior. And we see a number of common signs of mental illness in captive dolphins and whales. They exhibit behavioral stereotypies, repetitive behaviors that don't really have any function. These behaviors are very similar to what you see if you go and you see a tiger in a zoo in a small cage, pacing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. These kinds of behaviors indicate that there is something psychologically wrong and that there is something wrong in the brain. The behaviors that dolphins and whales exhibit include circling around and different head movements, and they also self-mutilate. Over 60% of orcas in captivity damage their teeth by grinding their jaws on the hard surfaces of the tank. And in the middle picture there, you see the dentition, the teeth, of an orca named Kiska who's living in Marineland, Canada in Ontario. And you can see that she doesn't really have any teeth. She ground her teeth down over the years by biting and grinding on hard surfaces in the tank. This is clearly abnormal and it shows emotional, psychological disturbance. They also bang their heads against the sides of the tank and exhibit depressive behaviors like anorexia and logging, which is just staying on the surface and floating and not being very active. And by the way, these are all signs of mental illness and psychological disturbance across species as well, including humans. So humans who have mental problems, emotional problems, often engage in depressive behaviors, stereotypies, and unfortunately self-mutilation. In the tanks, they also have very disturbed social interactions. They are hyper-aggressive towards each other, when in the wild, they tend to not be. In fact, there's a high incidence of calf mortality in captive settings. That doesn't happen as often in the wild. And as you know, there have been a number of tragic incidences of orcas who have killed their trainers and other people who have gotten into their tank, when in fact, in the wild, there has never been a case of a person seriously injured by an orca. And I've been among orcas up in British Columbia in a small boat, and never felt in any way that I was at risk. That just doesn't happen. It only happens in captivity. It tells you something about their mental state in those circumstances. We also see failure to parent and failure to attach and thrive of the infants. And finally, most orcas and belugas live about half as long in captivity as in the wild. So putting this together, this picture tells you that something is not working, that their welfare is very poor, living in concrete tanks. The bottom line is that these animals cannot thrive in marine park tanks. And the reasons for that have to do with space, have to do with their inability to exercise their large brains, to be social, to just have stimulation, to be autonomous beings that decide how they're going to live their lives. This doesn't work for them, and for a long time, marine mammal scientists like myself have known that, and we've looked for a solution. And that solution really comes in a new relationship with cetaceans. Now, I know in India, for instance, there have been some progressive legislation regarding personhood and dolphins. And we are not in the United States yet at that point, but we are getting there. The fact is that putting these animals in tanks to perform is not a viable way to interact with them. And so we need a new relationship to them. We need to provide reparation to them and get them out of the tanks, at least into sanctuaries. Sanctuaries are places to thrive, not just live. They are places where an individual whale or dolphin can live their entire lives and their welfare is the priority, which cannot be the case in zoos and aquariums. In sanctuaries, there's no performances, no breeding, because you don't want to make more captive animals, and no unnecessary invasive medical procedures. In sanctuaries, there is the promotion of autonomy and a natural life as much as possible. And one can do authentic education, conservation, and have full transparency. Another important aspect of sanctuaries is that they have to be sustainable with the surrounding environment. And that's very important. And we've spent several years doing environmental tests of our site to make sure that it is compatible with the environment and the other species who live in that environment. And it's also important that the human community that lives in that area embraces the sanctuary mission. And this is what we've done with the Whale Sanctuary Project. We started it in 2016, and the mission is to transform the way we relate to whales and dolphins by bringing an end to their exploitation and creating seaside sanctuaries. We also assist with international marine mammal rescues, and we advance whale and dolphin science. So let me tell you and show you our sanctuary, where we are. So obviously, we have to go up north to Canada, to a province, Nova Scotia. And we spent 2.5 years looking for the right site. We found a bay called Port Hilford on the northeastern side of Nova Scotia. And this is a close-up of that bay. This is Port Hilford. And I've noted where the sanctuary is going to be placed, at the mouth of that big, beautiful bay. And this is our artist rendition of what the sanctuary will look like. The sanctuary will be 100 acres of netted off space that has enough depth for orcas and beluga whales to dive. It will have a veterinary facility, and I'll tell you more about the specifics in a moment. But this is what it will look like. And as you can see, it is an expansive environment, and it's a natural environment for the animals. The net that goes around that site is over 1 mile long. And the specifics of the sanctuary are that it will be a netted off area of over 100 acres. That is over 300 times larger than the largest performance tank at SeaWorld or anywhere else in the world. And it will have depths up to 18 meters. It has a natural sandy bottom with fish and other animals able to move in and out of the sanctuary space. And we hope to give a home to 8 to 10 beluga whales and 2 to 3 orcas who are transferred from concrete tanks doing performances in entertainment parks to live a more natural life in a sanctuary. We will have on-site veterinary care. We will have a husbandry and training staff because we still have to maintain a number of different trained behaviors for their health and safety. We will eventually have an interpretive center where we will do education and outreach. we will have live streaming videos so people can see what the whales are doing under the water in the site. And what's important about that is that there will be things to do. Their large brains will be stimulated by a natural environment, by fish and other animals who come in and out of the sanctuary area through the net. And people will be able to see what beluga whales and orcas do when they're given the opportunity to just spend their day the way they want. And of course, there will be 24/7 security. Now, sanctuaries are still captivity, but this is the best we can do for them because those individuals who are currently living in marine parks have either been born there and do not have the skills to live in the wild. They still need to be fed and cared for. Those that were taken out of the wild have been there for many decades and have probably lost many of those skills. So unfortunately, once you create a group of whales and dolphins who know nothing about the wild, um, you have made sure that they cannot go back into the wild because they do not have survival skills. They depend upon culture and learning to get those, and they don't get that in the tanks. But this is a way of saying that we can do better for these animals. We can provide for them as much of a natural life as possible and give back to them what has been taken from them. So what I want to do now is first, I'll let you know that if you'd like more information, you can go to www.whalesanctuary.org. And I want to play a 5-minute video that gives you a view of why we're doing this and what it looks like. A very brief video, and I think you will enjoy it. So. I'm trying bigger. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can make it bigger. I don't know if I can.
Excuse me, madam. Sorry to bother you between the video, but most of the attendees in the webinar, they told me that they weren't able to listen to the audio of the video that you had played right now. You're on mute, madam.
Let's see if this works.
Sure, madam, not a problem.
Do you hear that?
No, madam, it's not audible.
It's not. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Um, Unfortunately, I don't know how to fix that. However, if you go to the Whale Sanctuary Project website, you will find this video on the front page, and can view it yourself. And that probably is the best we can do right now, unfortunately. So I'm going to leave it there and ask if there are any questions.
As we have come to the end of this webinar, I would like to thank Dr. Lori Marino, who has been an idol of mine and the major reason why I'm into cetaceans the way I am today. And I would like to thank the entire team of Whale Sanctuary Project for giving me this opportunity to conduct a webinar in front of my university and in front of a crowd which is about 82 in number. So I would like to thank everyone who has attended the webinar, and the platform is now open for a question answer session. If there are any questions from the audience, you can ask Dr. Lori Marino or you can drop it in the chat box. Hope the chat box is visible to you, madam. Visible for you,
That's
madam.
fine. Yes, it is. I'm just moving something here so that I can see everyone better. Okay, I am ready.
So if there are any questions from the side of the audience, please do go ahead.
I see there's one by Alan.
Good evening, ma'am. It was
Good evening.
really wonderful talk, and I thoroughly
Yes, I
loved
can.
it. So I have
Yes.
one question, ma'am, about has there been any studies where the interaction of humans and whales or the cetaceans, how they perceive our language? So for us to perceive another language itself is different, but how do these animals like understand what we try to tell? And they kind of, these trainers How do they get them to listen to them?
Well, that's a good question. How do these animals, if they do, how do they understand human language? Is that the question?
Yes, yeah, that's it.
Okay. So there's two things to say about that. First of all, when trainers work with these animals to get them to perform behaviors, they just use conditioning techniques, typical training techniques that usually involve giving them a food reward if they do the behavior that they desire. And that's something that doesn't require any understanding of language, as you know, because it's a very simple way to just have an animal do a behavior and get a reward for it. And then at some point, that animal learns that behavior. But there have been studies of how much dolphins understand about human language. With in Hawaii, there were several dolphins who were there in a research lab, and they were presented with a simple sentences that had syntax, grammar. And the dolphins were very, very good at picking that up. So they understood things like bring the basket to the ball means something different than bring the ball to the basket. It means that they understood that there was certain gestures and whistles that represented objects in their environment, and that the order of those gestures or whistles represented meaning. And that's a simple form of grammar, a syntax. So the dolphins are very, very good at picking up a simple form of human language. And I would say they're a lot better at understanding our language than we are understanding theirs.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
There is another question from 21CZBT64. I would request that person to go ahead with the question. 21CZBT64, if you're present, you can go ahead with your question.
Hi, ma'am.
Hello.
Thank you so much for the session. It was really good.
Thank you.
I heard dolphins can actually recognize a pregnant woman's fetus. Like they say, they use echolocation to recognize like a pregnant woman in a crowd. Ma'am, is it like a really true, or like it is just a myth or something?
Are you asking about whether or not they can recognize a fetus in the womb?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. The answer is yes. And the reason is because when you think about it, a fetus is in the womb floating in fluid. And as long as an object is in fluid, then a dolphin can use echolocation to explore it, to perceive it. And many women who are pregnant have gotten into the water with dolphins and have said that the dolphins come up to them and vigorously echolocate on their abdomen, their belly. And they seem to understand that there is something going on in there. There's nothing supernatural about it, or it's a very natural process, perceptual ability that these animals have because they can echolocate through water. And what that means is that they can also determine determine what's going on with each other internally. They can see inside each other. So their echolocation ability is really sophisticated. It's something that, obviously we as humans don't have that ability, but they certainly do. And so, yes, they can detect a pregnancy in a woman or a dolphin or any other animal in the water.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Madam, we have three questions from three different people. So the first question is from Mr. Joshua. Mr. Joshua, if you're there in the meeting, please do go ahead with your question.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Thank you for the talk. It was quite informative.
You're welcome.
Right. It was my understanding that the great white sharks are the apex predators of the ocean and that there was no one in the sea to compare with them. But only recently, I saw footage of orcas hunting down a great white shark, particularly for the liver that's in those sharks. And so my question is, one, what are your thoughts on that? And how do these sharks develop a taste towards the liver in particular? Why the liver of all things?
Oh, great question. So first of all, yes, we've all been taught that great white sharks are the top predators of the ocean, and in many ways they are. However, I would say that if you really wanted to look at the top predators, it would be orcas, because orcas can kill great white sharks, as you just mentioned. Now, there is a group of orcas who, as you said, will kill great white sharks, and they will do so and then just take the liver. And you would think, why would they do that? And I honestly, I don't think anyone understands that. It's cultural. Not all orcas do this, and it is probably considered a delicacy. And I say that with all seriousness. It is the way we are with certain food items. We don't eat everything, we eat certain parts of things. And for some reason, they started this culture of killing great whites and eating the liver, and it's been passed on through the generations. So I don't have a good explanation for it, but it is like a lot of other orca societies, the ones that I showed you who eat only manta rays. There's other fish that they could eat, but they've chosen to be culturally very focused upon eating manta rays. And I just think that they're very, very culturally bound animals. And depending upon what group you're looking at, you will see very odd cultural traditions.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Actually, that reminds me of the large whales that are seen in Avatar Part 2, if you've seen that.
I've heard about it. I've heard about the whale creatures, yes.
They show just the same tendencies that you just mentioned, different cultural traditions and all that.
They're very cultural. I mean, they really very specialized in what they eat, how they do things, and so forth.
Well, thank you, ma'am.
You're very welcome.
We have two more questions from two different people. So the first question is from 221 Zoo 11. If 221 Zoo 11 is present in the meeting, you can go ahead with your question.
Hello.
Hello.
Ma'am. It's nice
Hello.
having you for the talk today. And I have a question of one of the most Europe's delicacies that had been accepted by the country. Mostly a part of the country might have accepted it. In particular, I'm talking about the whale meat that is being, hunted for about from around 1,500 centuries.
Yes.
That is particularly about the North Atlantic island, the Faroe Island in particular.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts about the tradition that have been practice there, since they don't have any agricultural lands there to process their own food. They're dependent on these sort of practices of hunting the whale. They actually try to breach the whale into their land and hunt them meticulously. So, what are your thoughts about this kind of practice in the Faroe Island, ma'am?
Yes, thank you for asking about that. In the Faroe Islands, there are grins. They drive pilot whales and other cetaceans into coves, and then they kill them. And this kind of thing is done in Japan and in many other countries as well. But the Faroe Islands have done this, for, as you said, a long time, and they kill hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals every year. I see it as a very cruel practice. I understand that this is part of their culture, but culture is also something that can change. My understanding of this is that it is not subsistence. In other words, while they may eat the whale meat, it is not the only way that they can sustain themselves. And the way in which they do this is extremely cruel, extremely. I mean, it's just horrific. So I want to see it end. I think another very troubling aspect of this is what it does to children. You'll see pictures of little kids standing on top of a dying whale. And this becomes fun. It becomes a game. It becomes sport to them. And what it does is it desensitizes them to the feelings of the animal. And then it creates a whole new generation of people who don't consider how cruel this is. So I am very much against it. I think it has to stop. And I think that this the Faroese people can stop doing what they're doing and still subsist. And that's because we are flexible and we are able to live in more than one way. So it has to stop. It's one of the most egregious forms of mass killing of cetaceans in the world.
Yes, ma'am, I do totally agree with it. And coming to the whale meat, since the mercury level in this whale meat is too high, don't you think it is going to affect humans actually consuming it in a larger quantity throughout the year?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In Japan, for instance, where they have the Taiji drive hunts, not so much now, but they've used to eat the meat of the dolphins that they killed. And what happened is that the mercury built up and there were children being born with mercury poisoning, terrible, terrible birth defects. And actually they just continued that. The government knew that and they allowed it to continue. So yeah, you're absolutely right. This has an impact on humans as well. Dolphins are top level predators, so that means that any pollutants like mercury become concentrated in their meat. And if you eat that meat, you get those poisons, and that is exactly what is happening.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
We have two more questions, madam.
Yes.
Sia Bhagat, if you are there in the meeting, please go ahead with your question. Miss Sia Bhagat. If Miss Sia Bhagat isn't willing to unmute herself, you can type in your question in the chat box and let Dr. Marino know about what your question is. If Miss Sia Bhagat isn't there in the meeting, we'll go ahead with the next question. Uh,
Kaushik, Sia is there. I guess you should unmute. Sia, you can put your question in the chat box.
okay.
Hello? I can't hear anyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, madam, you're audible.
Okay, thank you.
By the time Sia types in a question, we'll go with the next question.
Okay.
Okay, so 21 CBZ 58, if you're there in the meeting, please do go ahead with your question. 21 CBZ 58.
Evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
It was a really informative talk. I thank you for that. And
Thank you.
my question now is you work with orcas in captivity. And one of the major characteristics or measures of stress that they experience in captivity is the bending of their dorsal fin.
Yes, that is very common in male orcas who are held in tanks. And we think it has something to do with the fact that the dorsal fin droops because it's not held up by the water column. It's so shallow that a lot of the time the dorsal fin is out of the water and doesn't have the support of being in the water column itself. We don't know what the effect is of a drooping dorsal fin, and we don't know whether it is a sign of other kinds of issues, but certainly in orcas who are so large, living in marine parks, they don't get adequate exercise. And so generally, they don't have a very good body condition. And the drooping dorsal fin is just only one sign of that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
So, madam, we have two questions in the chat box and
Okay.
three questions from people who have raised their hands. Uh, I would like to call Miss Sia Bhagat. If she's there in the meet, you can go ahead with your question.
Yes. I'm sorry. I hope I'm audible right now.
Yes,
Hello.
Sia, you are on.
Yeah. Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. And I just wanted to say that out of hobby, I had done some secondary research on understanding how orcas are able to communicate and coordinate complicated concepts to come up with new ideas and implement them effectively. So in that, I had a question, after reading so much. I'm not sure, but I wanted to know your views to understand that has their evolution after a certain point been driven by the culture that exists between pods? So, what do you have to say about this?
Can someone repeat the question? Thank you for the question. Can someone repeat it so that I can hear it just a little bit better?
Do you want me to say it again a
Yes,
bit slowly, maybe?
would you repeat it, but just if you would speak louder so that I can hear your question.
Okay, is it fine now?
Better, yes.
Yeah, so I was saying that I tried to understand and read a bit about how orcas are able to communicate and coordinate complicated concepts.
Yes.
And in during that time, I had a question that do you think their evolution after a certain point was driven by the culture that exists between their pods?
Very good question. Excellent question. The question is about whether culture can drive evolution. And I most certainly know that that is the case. And what's interesting is we have examples of that. For instance, in the Southwest of the United States, there is a community of orcas called the Southern Residents. They eat almost entirely a certain type of salmon, Chinook salmon. 80% of their diet is made up of these kinds of salmon. Now, they share space with another group called the transient orcas. The transients eat mammals, seals, otters, porpoises. So here are two groups of orcas who live in the same area but have become separate because of their different culture, and they do not reproduce across groups. So eventually they will end up being two different species or two different subspecies. Whenever you have one group not reproducing with another group for cultural reasons, that is exactly an example of the kind of culture-driven evolution that you're asking about. And we see this in many different types of animals, including dolphins and whales. Great question.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And another thing is, I'm really interested in studying marine biology, studying marine biology. So, I mean, I would be really glad to know if there's a way I can be in touch with you or communicate with you, maybe over mail or something,
Yes,
if you're
definitely.
okay with it. Yeah.
Yes, yes. You can email me. If you go to our website, you can email me at info@whalesanctuary.org, and I will get that email, and we can talk further about your plans and your interests.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
You're very welcome.
So, moving on to the next question, we have a question from Raman Kumar. If Mr. Raman Kumar is there in the meet, you can go ahead with your question. Mr.
Good
Raman Kumar,
evening, madam.
your question.
I'm sorry.
Hello,
Good evening. I'm sorry.
Raman.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. First of all, I want to say it's such an honor and privilege to get to talk to you, and thank you so much for the informative talk.
You're welcome.
Thank you, madam. And my question is, earlier you talked about the language-based intelligence that these cetaceans possess. We talked about them having different dialects among different groups of populations and
Yeah.
how they can understand the syntax and grammar in human languages as well. And my question is, there are also other aspects of intelligence, right? Not such as mathematics or spatial intelligence and stuff like that. So my question is, especially those aspects of intelligence like mathematics or philosophy or like other types of intelligence that indicate higher levels of cognition, how do we study those types of intelligence in cetacean species?
That's a very good question. And it has to do with how we can study very complex, high level cognitive abilities in cetaceans. And so we've learned quite a lot about them from studies that have been done with captive cetaceans. We've learned they recognize themselves in mirrors, that they learn language, that they also have numerical ability, mathematical ability. They understand the concept of zero, for instance, and they really do have some very, very sophisticated cognitive abilities that depend upon things like perspective taking and thinking about one's own thoughts. So in all of the types of studies that have been done with them, primarily bottlenose dolphins, they have really shown an aptitude. They've really shown the ability to meet the challenge, if you will. But there is always going to be a limit on what we can learn about that, because we are limited as the ones who do the studying. We're limited to studies that we can understand. So in other words, we're limited by studies that provide information that we can understand, indicate something. And so a lot of what we don't know comes into play. But the other thing is that in the wild, where a lot of the cutting edge research is being done now, you can infer certain cognitive abilities when you look at the behavior. So for instance, when you look at cooperative hunting, you have to infer that for that to take place, there's a level of communication that needs to happen. We may not know everything about it, but we know that it has to be there. So there are different ways that we can look at complex cognition in these animals, but dolphins and whales have, basically risen to the occasion whenever we've given them a really tough task, and shows that they are capable of some very sophisticated cognition.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Ma'am, there is another question from 222BZ15. If 222BZ15 is in the meet, you can go ahead with your question.
Good evening, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello. Before you continue, I cannot hear you very well. Can you maybe speak louder?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Ma'am, thank you so much for this this Google Meet. Sorry, Teams Meet, whatever. Is really informative. I was wondering, when you have whales and dolphins put into artificial water, like into tanks and stuff, how do they maintain the salt levels? Because like they're put from the sea into artificial water. So how does that work, and like how do they balance that?
Well, that's a good question. So whales and dolphins who are living in tanks have to have water come in at the right pH, the right temperature, and it has to be clean and so forth. And that's done in a number of ways. It can be done by pumping in ocean water, or it can be done by treating fresh water and adding components to it that keep the pH level just right. The water is usually filtered through ozone or chlorine. Chlorine is very irritating to the eyes, so it's not a very good way to keep the water clean. So there's lots of technology and machinery that goes into maintaining a dolphin or a whale in a tank, and it's not just salt level, it's temperature and many different aspects of the water.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. There's a question about whether the sanctuary will be a permanent habitat for the whales, and the answer is yes. They will not eventually be released because they do not have the skills to live in the wild on their own.
There are two more questions in the chat box, madam. One is Sadia. She wanted to know the difference between the river dolphins of the Amazon River and the South Asian river dolphins from the oceanic dolphins that we find in the oceans around the world.
It's very interesting. The river dolphins or freshwater dolphins seem to be a little different than the oceanic dolphins. They're different in that their habitat is quite different. They live in a smaller area and a more shallow area, but they also don't seem to be as social as oceanic dolphins. They tend to be alone. They tend not to be as socially bonded to each other as the oceanic dolphins. So they're very interesting. Another difference is that because they live in rivers that are filled with silt, they tend to be almost blind or close to blind, and they use echolocation to get around, to find prey, and so forth. So they are a little bit different than the oceanic dolphins. They're a very interesting group. And they do not do well in captivity. Every single river or freshwater dolphin who has been taken into captivity for one reason or another has died. They just become extremely upset, and they usually die of something called capture myopathy, which is basically a heart attack. And they just don't do well in captivity, even compared to the others.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for answering this question. There are
Welcome.
two more questions, and I'm so sorry for uh, taking your time by.
That's
um,
fine. I'm enjoying this, so don't worry.
Okay, madam. So the next question is from Miss Simra, and she wanted to know about instances where captive cetaceans had injured people in captivity.
Yes, well, unfortunately, there have been thousands of incidences. Obviously, we know about orcas and the orca Tilikum, who killed 3 people. So there have been 4 people killed by orcas in captivity. There have been people who have been severely injured, drowned, sent to the hospital by bottlenose dolphins. All of these injuries occur in the captive setting, and it's quite dangerous to swim with these animals in these swim programs, because they don't want to be there. They're very stressed, and they're large wild animals, and they can be very, very dangerous and violent. So yeah, I mean, there's the places that offer these swim programs don't tell you a lot about that, but there are numerous types of injuries and people sent to the hospital or have been killed swimming with these animals in the tanks. It is not a good idea. It is risky.
Thank you so much.
And I contrast that with what happens in the wild, because generally in the wild, if you try to swim with dolphins and they don't want to swim with you, then they just swim away. But if they're in a tank and you get in the tank, there's nowhere for them to go, and so they become aggressive.
Thank you very much, madam, for answering the question. I personally have one final question for you, and I'm so sorry for taking your time.
Not at all. I'm enjoying this, and please proceed.
So, madam, my question to you is we have heard so much about captive orcas, belugas, and dolphins. So, you see these trainers with them in the water. So,
Yes.
is training an orca, beluga, or dolphin similar to training a pet that you have at home? Similar to training your dog? Is it similar to training your dog?
Oh, very good question. A lot of people think that it is similar to training your dog. training an orca. And in one sense, the same kinds of practices or behaviors are used. So, when you want to train any individual who doesn't speak your language, you do that by a certain method. That means that if they get close to doing the behavior that you want, you reward them, and then eventually they do the behavior perfectly, and it's always reward driven. So in that sense, it's the same, but in another sense, it is entirely different. And the difference is that your dog is domesticated, and orcas, beluga whales, dolphins, any cetaceans in captivity are not. They are still wild animals. And that difference makes the difference, because a wild animal cannot be relied upon to necessarily, even if you train them, even if you think they are tame, um, they can always sort of revert back to their wild nature. They just are not as reliable as a domesticated animal. And that's why you see a lot of these problems with dolphins and whales injuring others, because they're frustrated. They don't want, their mentality is not the kind of mentality that likes to be trained or conditioned. They're wild animals, and you always have to remember that they're not domesticated in any way.
Thank you very much, madam. It was a really informative session, and all the questions and answers that we got will certainly help budding marine biologists and marine biologists who have interest in cetaceans to look at these animals differently, and how and help everyone understand how these behemoths are important for the environment that we live in. So I
Thank
would like to hand over the session to Mr. Alan Brito for the vote of thanks. He is an associate professor at the Department of Zoology, St. Joseph's University. And if Mr. Alan Brito is here, I would like him to get on with the vote of thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. And yeah, very good evening to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Good
It,
evening.
it's an honor to have you here amidst us. So, and we thank you for accepting our invitation and to address our students. We are really humble. This is a very humble experience for us, like humbling experience, having such a great personality stepping over to address us. So thank you so much, ma'am, for that, and thank you for your team for doing such a wonderful job there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, for being tolerant of all the technical difficulties. And again, if any of the students, anyone wants to contact me, just email me at info@whalesanctuary.org, and I will get the email and would be happy to chat further with you. So thank you. It's really been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. So in this moment, I would like to address a few things which ma'am had told. It well, like maybe until the pandemic, we didn't know what it felt like to be closed up in a concrete wall. But today, with the pandemic hitting us, we actually could relate to what the whales are, or the whales, the dolphins are going through today. So we hope that we will have good conservation biologists coming up from our university, so where we would work towards the self-awareness, the bonding, the social awareness of these animals. So thank you about that, ma'am. It was really nice to hear all these words, because we just learn about mammals and it's done, but no one spoke about their behavior or their psychology of how would they feel. But thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
And we would thank the university, the administration, the management, the Vice Chancellor, the Registrar, and the Dean for their support and their encouragement for this webinar to happen. I would love to thank, I would thank the staff members of the department for their constant support. But also tell the students, the NSA core, and the volunteers. There's also the student coordinator, Mr. Kaushik and Jitu, for putting in all their efforts, and Mr. Abhishek, the president of the NSA, for guiding them throughout. I would also thank all the participants that are present here for the wonderful question, for the interactive sessions, and last of all of this couldn't have happened if it was not for our HOD, Dr. Jay Shankar. Thank you, sir. And at this moment, I would also like to just tell you guys about we would drop a link in the chat box for your kind feedback, so participants take some time off and please drop in your feedbacks. And finally thank the whole NSA group, the NSA or the National Science Association of the UG and the Zoology of the PG. For any more updates regarding any seminars or initiatives that is brought about, please follow us on our social media handles, which will be put on the chat box. And yeah, thank you so much, man. Over to you, Kaushik. Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alan Brito. The feedback form will be provided in the chat box. Yes, you can access the link on the chat box, and I just have to say that I've had a very humbling experience of conducting my first webinar as a part of the core group of Natural Science Association of St. Joseph's University, and to do this in front of my idol, it's just surreal. And what a better way to start the Josephite Forum for Marine Biology with the
Well,
that webinar on
thank
cetacean behavior
thank you
observation.
so much. And I'm very happy to be here. And yes, just please feel free to stay in touch. And it is so heartening to know that there's such good students on the other side of the globe who are doing great work and are interested. And please stay in touch. I'm found this to be very enjoyable, and I'm really honored to be asked to do this. So thank you so much.
So, students, before you leave, I would request every one of you to kindly fill in the feedback form and do follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We have our own official and handles for the National Science Association of St. Joseph's University. Please do follow us, and we couldn't have done it without your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, madam. It
Have
was
a
a
good
great
day.
Bye, ma'am.